At 9:17 local time, an Australian P-8 Poseidon was cruising at 21,000 feet south of the Paracel Islands, flying the same rectangular reconnaissance pattern it always flew. 2 hours of quiet air, routine sensor sweeps, a calm crew, and then Beijing decided to send a message. What the Chinese Su-35 pilot didn't understand is that this was exactly what Australia wanted. 10 seconds later, the Su-35 burst out of the clouds ahead, both engines in full afterburner, closing at nearly the speed of sound. It knifed across the Poseidon's nose at roughly 600 feet, so close the Australians could see the pilot's helmet turn and track them. At the combined closure rate, just under 1,000 miles per hour, the difference between an intercept and a collision was less than half a second. The wake turbulence hit the P-8 like an invisible hammer. The 190,000-pound patrol aircraft snapped into a hard left roll. Autopilot kicked off. The stick shaker rattled. The pilots fought the controls as the engines coughed in the disturbed airflow, and then the ESM panel lit up. An X-band fire control radar, not a search sweep, not a wide scan. A narrow, focused beam, painting the Poseidon like a bullseye. The Su-35's radar was drilling into them. To the Chinese pilot, that was intimidation. To the Australians, that was Christmas morning, because those bumps and bulges on the P-8's fuselage aren't cosmetic, they're purpose-built. The AN/ALQ-240 Electronic Support Measures Suite is basically a vacuum cleaner for the electromagnetic spectrum, built to inhale emissions, measure them, fingerprint them, and file them into a database. The instant that fire control radar touched the P-8, the ALQ-240 started harvesting. Frequency, pulse repetition, scan mode, power output, beam shape, timing quirks, everything that takes engineers years and billions of dollars to refine and protect. And that data wasn't staying on the airplane. It was being packaged, encrypted, and pushed through satellite link to analysts who were already waiting for it. The Australian pilot calmly re-engaged autopilot, held 21,000 feet, and maintained heading 095, steady as if nothing unusual was happening. Then he keyed the radio with the kind of controlled tone that only comes from knowing you're already winning. This is an Australian military aircraft conducting lawful operations in international airspace. No panic, no pleading, no deviation. The Su-35 was already banking away to set up another pass, and the pilot probably believed he was escalating. In reality, he was volunteering. Because when the fighter came back, it didn't slash across their nose this time. It slid in on their left wing and held position, about 130 feet away, matching speed at roughly 440 knots. Close formation shadowing, a show of dominance, but he was giving Australia a private airshow at point-blank range. The P-8's MX-20 HD electro-optical turret swung and locked, high-definition video at maximum resolution, the kind of camera that can read a license plate from altitude, now staring at an Su-35 from a football field away. Every weapons pylon, every panel seam, every access hatch, every antenna blister, every serial-marked component, recorded, stabilized, tagged. The infrared channel added a second layer, heat mapping across the airframe. Exhaust plumes, hot hydraulic runs beneath the skin, avionics bays, electrical hotspots, even the subtle warmth where fluid lines and actuators worked hardest. That isn't just cool footage, that is targeting intelligence. It tells engineers where heat seekers will see best. It tells planners where a warhead will do maximum damage. It tells EW teams what parts of the aircraft run hottest under load. And the Su-35 pilot kept holding position like he was posing for photographs. Then he started showing off thrust vectoring, those exhaust nozzles that can pivot in multiple directions, constantly micro-adjusting, letting the aircraft generate control forces that don't depend on airspeed. It's why the Su-35 can do slow-speed tricks that look almost impossible. Impressive engineering. Also, fully documented. From 130 feet away, Australian operators logged nozzle movement patterns, deflection angles, response delays, correction rhythm. They captured how the aircraft stabilizes itself in turbulent air, because in a future fight, if you understand how a jet stays stable, you also understand how to disrupt that stability. and the danger inside the aircraft was obvious. If the P-8 twitched, its 123-foot wingspan could sweep into the Su-35. The fighter could dance away in milliseconds. The Poseidon, basically a jetliner with military sensors, needed time to respond. But the Chinese pilot made a critical error in judgment. He positioned himself exactly where the MX-20 HD could image his entire weapons load in perfect detail. 2 R-77 radar-guided missiles on the inboard pylons. 2 R-73 heat seekers on the wingtips. Loadout, confirmed. Configuration, confirmed. Hardpoints, confirmed. The wing rock came next. International, follow-me language. The P-8 did not follow. So the Su-35 kicked rudder and threw jet wash across the Poseidon's nose, an angry shove in the air. And all it accomplished was giving Australian analysts more numbers. Control response, yaw rate, stabilization correction, wake impact behavior. Maintain course, the pilot said, calm. He wants a reaction. Let him perform. Because the Chinese pilot believed proximity meant dominance. He didn't understand that every second he stayed close was another second of intelligence collection. Then he climbed. The Su-35 pitched up, rose about 500 feet above the Poseidon, and rolled inverted. And for 2 full seconds, it hung upside down directly over them, looking straight down through the canopy at the Australians. It was dramatic. It was risky. And from a military intelligence perspective, it was a gift. At that airspeed, the maneuver should have been unstable, too slow to rely purely on standard aerodynamic controls, too fast for hovering tricks. Thrust vectoring and the flight computer were doing the work, solving physics problems dozens of times per second to keep a 42,000-pound fighter from tumbling out of control. Australia had theorized about those edge case envelopes for years. Now they had high-definition proof. The Su-35 rolled into a barrel maneuver around the P-8, tracing a clean cylinder in the sky with the patrol plane at its center. As it crossed the tail, the gap tightened, down to roughly 65 feet, close enough that tail cameras captured individual rivet lines on the Su-35's underside. One small miscalculation, and 21 tons of fighter would have scythed through the Poseidon's tail, but it didn't. It completed the orbit, and the MX-20 HD recorded everything: roll rate, altitude deviations, speed bleed in the inverted phase, recovery dynamics, vectoring corrections. A performance demonstration that would normally require years of spy satellites and human sources, delivered for free, on camera, in daylight clear detail. As the Su-35 rolled level on the right side, its wake slammed into the P-8 again, harder this time. The patrol plane bucked, nose pitched up. Autopilot dropped offline. Airspeed swung wildly. In the cabin, sensor operators braced as equipment shifted. They lost altitude, over 1,000 feet in the recovery. Engine 2 barked into a brief compressor stall, then stabilized as the FADEC fought to restore normal flow. It was sudden, it was ugly, but it was manageable, and the satellite data link never stopped. Every second of that turbulence, every engine behavior change, every radar emission, every flight control twitch already transmitted. The Su-35 disappeared beneath them during the recovery, then reappeared, climbing back into view on the tactical scope. But instead of taking station off the wing, it accelerated ahead, setting up something else. The fighter climbed 1,000 feet in front and yanked throttles to idle. Its speed collapsed from around 440 knots to roughly 250 in just a few seconds. To the P-8 crew, it looked like a sports car brake checking a semi on the highway. Closure rates spiked. At that rate, they had seconds before a collision. The Poseidon's throttles came back hard, but turbofan physics is slow physics. Big rotating masses, delay, spool down time you can't cheat. The cockpit filled with synthetic warnings. Traffic, traffic, traffic. The Chinese pilot believed he had built a perfect trap. Climb and the P-8 risks stall. Dive and it accelerates into him. Turn and its wide wingspan sweeps through the fighter's line. So the only move was to pull power and pray the distance opened. And while the crew fought for spacing, Australian analysts were quietly winning again, because that entire deceleration profile was being recorded. Throttle response, minimum controllable speed, energy bleed rate, acceleration curve on relight. Those are the numbers tacticians use to design an energy trap in real combat. He was writing the instruction manual for how to beat him. At the last moment, the Su-35 lit its engines again, dove, and passed beneath with about 130 feet to spare. More data logged. Then the jet wash hit. Hot exhaust and disturbed air slammed into the P-8's intakes. Engine 1 surged, stumbled, and flamed out. Fire warning. FADEC fighting. Relight procedure. Serious, but not critical. They trained for this. The tactical coordinator's voice stayed level. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Australian patrol aircraft experiencing engine failure after hostile action. And even while transmitting, he checked the uplink. Green. The data was safe. The Su-35 climbed back up in front again. Closer this time, a few hundred feet, tight geometry. Then, the sensors showed something new. Countermeasures armed. The UV-26 dispenser, Russia's standard flare and chaff suite, was ready, and the fighter positioned itself directly ahead of the P-8's flight path, almost like it wanted the Poseidon to fly through what came next. For the Australians, the danger was obvious. If flares went out in their intake corridor, magnesium fragments could be ingested. Best case, foreign object damage and weeks in a hangar. Worst case, dual engine failure at 21,000 feet over open water. But for intelligence collection, this was the jackpot. Because militaries don't just guard missiles and radars. They guard the chemistry of their countermeasures. Burn temperature, spectral signature, dispersion pattern, ignition timing, composition. Those traits decide whether an enemy missile can be programmed to ignore the decoy and track the real aircraft. And the Chinese pilot was about to demonstrate that system at close range, for free. The P-8's infrared sensors automatically shifted to high-speed capture, thousands of frames per second. The ESM suite prepared to log ignition and control signatures. Brace, the pilot called. Possible engine failure. Nobody powered anything down. They tuned it. They sharpened it. Because this was the most valuable 30 seconds of the entire encounter. The Su-35 made one final radio transmission, demanding the P-8 turn back. The Poseidon held course, and then the Su-35's belly erupted. A cascade of flares, dozens, a blinding curtain of burning magnesium, hot enough to turn the night into a welding arc. A wall of fire 60 feet wide and 100 feet tall. The P-8 was about to hit it. In the moment before impact, Australian sensors captured everything. Thermal bloom curve, multi-band infrared signature, dispersion geometry, timing intervals. The exact flare fingerprint engineers need to train missiles to see through it. Then the fragments hit. Optical sensors washed out white. Burning particles peppered the nose and radome. Hot air distorted readings. The smell of heated metal seeped into the aircraft. Engine 2 ingested the first debris. Compressor stall, fuel cut, restart attempt, then more fragments, another stall, another restart. Engine 1, already stressed, began vibrating violently as molten particles warped fan blades. Airspeed bled, stick shaker rattled continuously. At altitude, with thrust falling, every knot mattered. The pilot pushed the nose down, trading altitude for speed. Controlled, practiced, professional. And even then, the uplink stayed green. Because the mission, the real mission, wasn't to win a dogfight. It was to collect. And the collection was complete. Engine 2 finally relit and stabilized at partial power. Engine 1 held enough thrust to keep them flying, though it shook like it wanted to tear itself apart. The Su-35 peeled away and vanished into haze. Its pilot would report a victory. He forced an emergency. He proved resolve. He intimidated an Allied aircraft. Beijing would likely call it success, but it wasn't, because within 24 hours, the intelligence from that encounter would spread across Allied networks. Radar frequencies cataloged, vectoring envelope mapped, control response curves measured, countermeasure signatures captured. Future missiles would know what those flares look like. Future planners would know how the Su-35 bleeds energy. Future EW teams would know what the radar sounds like when it locks. Beijing sent a fighter to deliver a message. Australia received something else, a full data package, an operating manual, an expensive mistake made at 130 feet. Bye for now.